Why does MMA use 4-ounce gloves? Why don't they use bigger gloves? Or like boxing gloves or karate gloves or any other glove rather than the thin 4 ounces? They look like half of a completed glove. They might as well like kind of not really use gloves to begin with. Well, there's a reason behind that. And it has a little bit of history as well. So let's get into it. What if I tell you that that was actually how it began? In the early days of the UFC, everybody was fighting bare knuckle. So when was the gloves introduced? Was it really to encourage more knockouts? Is it for style? Well, not really. There's a bit of history behind that, and it dates all the way back to the early days of the UFC. So when the UFC first started, there was no gloves. It was bare knuckle. It was called the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and the goal of the show was to find out the ultimate fighter or the most ultimate form of fighting in the entire world. There was no gloves, bare knuckle, barely had any rules. People could even kick each other in the nuts back then. But nowadays, modern MMA looks a little bit different. I'll give you the straight answer to why 4-ounce was introduced. Mainly because too many people were breaking hands. Yeah, that's right. They were breaking their own fist rather than, thinking about breaking somebody's head. Nah. Our temple is naturally much more stronger than our fist. So when a lot of people are punching each other in the head, essentially what ended up was they would break their hands. So in the end, after all these injuries, it was basically bad PR. A lot of people thought MMA was very violent. So essentially, wearing or introducing the 4-ounce gloves was good for the image and good for the brand of mixed martial arts. So why is it in professional MMA that they don't use bigger gloves? Why do they use smaller gloves? We'll touch on that a little bit for the amateur side, because pro fights, they use 4-ounce gloves. For the amateur side, they use 7-ounce gloves. There's a reason for that as well. But let's just keep it to the pros for now. So the reason why they don't use like bigger gloves or traditional style gloves like boxing gloves, of course, because it's mixed martial arts. Obviously, they're not just gonna punch. Obviously, there's gonna be more than that. They're gonna be grappling, that's the biggest one. That's why they have to keep the fingers open. That way they can grab each other, put each other in locks, get takedowns, submissions, all that has to do with grappling. So basically the small gloves was to help with incorporating grappling in their fights. But why 4-ounce specifically? Why not use the thicker gloves if it's worrying about people breaking their hands? Well, 4-ounce is just enough protection, and it helps with grappling a lot as the gloves are a lot thinner, so gloves don't get stuck, when you're grappling against the fence or when you're grappling on the floor. It's just enough and kind of justifies for professional fighting. You see, with smaller gloves, it kind of encourages people to be a lot more accurate with their fights as well. It kind of changes their fight style. So with smaller gloves, even in striking, it's a whole different ball game. Because usually if you watch like boxing with bigger gloves and everything, they'll be blocking with their hands and all. But with smaller gloves, you're kind of limited to that. You can't really block punches as effectively as if you wear big gloves. Because smaller gloves means even if you cover up, those smaller surface area, they can penetrate through your guard and everything. So striking becomes a lot more dynamic. It requires a lot more accuracy as it does compared to like just traditional boxing or kickboxing or even Muay Thai. Now let's get to the amateur side. Why does the amateur side wear 7-ounce gloves instead of 4 ounces? Well, the bigger padding really is not just to protect the fighter's knuckles, as we mentioned for the reason why gloves are introduced in MMA in general, but actually the bigger gloves are there to prevent cuts from happening. 4-ounce gloves, people can still get cut when punching each other. So they try to reduce the amount of bone-to-bone contact. And that's just not like within the glove side, right? It's not just for the gloves. That's why amateur MMA, they wear shin pads as well. The shin pads are not there to protect the shin or to give less damage when you kick or everything. Nah, if you wear like proper amateur competition shin pads, they're really thin. So they're mainly there to prevent the bone-to-bone, because the bone-to-bone is where most of the cuts happen. And of course, in amateur setting, you're not getting paid to fight. And the idea behind amateur fights is to have the fighters be able to fight another day. So as different to professional fighting, because professional fighting, you'll be fighting today, and then your next fight is probably in the next two to three months. For amateurs, people could be fighting this month, they could be fighting next month. And some people are crazy enough to fight continuously week after week. I do not recommend you to do that, but there are people who do this. And in amateur setting, it is a lot safer to compete as they have less bone-to-bone, less chances of getting cut. But of course, bruising will always be there. Well, there you go. So That's why MMA uses small gloves, but I think this video is more towards why pros use 4 ounces and why amateurs use 7 ounces. Mainly because of the extra protection to prevent the cuts rather than to say that it prevents like impact damage or like to reduce concussions. Nah, that one all stays the same. It's just mainly on the cuts. That's why with the shin pads and the thicker gloves, that's about it for mixed martial arts. Of course, in the rules of MMA, for amateur, it goes a lot deeper, but at least we cover ground for why 7 ounces instead of 4 ounces, and at least I give you a little bit of backstory of why 4-ounce gloves was introduced for MMA in general. So yeah, that's all guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video. Ciao.